Hey there, old souls. It's Dr. J, and I'd like to use this session to deconstruct my own reaction to a extremely popular clip in which famed scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson responds to the question, "Do you believe in God?" And I want to talk about this because I think there are a lot of important insights about society, about spirituality, about science that we can discover through the analogies that arise in this situation. So let's walk through the story. It begins when I see a clip in which a comedian, in a setting where she sort of presents herself like a journalist, Chelsea Handler, interviews Neil deGrasse Tyson, famous scientist, and asks him if he believes in God. Now, it's fine that she asked that, and I have nothing to say about her or her show, except that we often fail to be critical when we consume material about anything in the media. We don't often look at the outlet. We don't often look at the context. We don't often question the motive of the person asking the questions. And the reason why that's a problem in this day and age is because whatever the transaction is can then be clipped, so to speak, cut or excerpted, and then posted independently. And suddenly someone who has no idea what the context was or doesn't understand the way that context might have influenced the answer, they are now consuming the answer alone. So this to me is sort of insight number one, which is that all information must be understood in context, or we may be misinformed. And we've seen tons of that in recent years. The second thing, the way he answers the question in the clip is essentially to say, the only idea of God that I've heard is that God is all powerful and God is all good. And because I see things that happen that are not good, and I see people of faith asking God for help and God doesn't intervene, I have to conclude, he says, that God is either not always good or not always powerful, because those two things ain't always happening. Now, I actually completely agree with his critique of those specific people and those specific traditions that suggest that God is like a person, and that God can be like a person who has both power and benevolence and can act on the world. The idea or the characterization of God as a person is at best a metaphor, an analogy. It is to evoke the human connection to God and God's design and what God is, so to speak. But it is extremely, extremely important to me from a social science perspective, from a comparative religion perspective, and actually from a mystical and consciousness studies perspective. It is absolutely important to clarify that I do agree that those worldviews are dangerous, because what they do is they take a very narrow concept of something infinite, something mysterious, something eternal, something beyond thought, and then they collapse their understanding of it into a literal interpretation. A literal interpretation. And of course, what we see in the modern West, in particular in Christianity and Islam, less so in Judaism, actually, dramatically less so. And of course, very little in Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism and Confucianism and indigenous traditions, like almost none. But what we see in this popular modern interpretation of God, and I say modern meaning I think it's been codified over the last 1,000 years, although I don't know that we have compelling evidence that around what we call BCE, before the Common Era or just after the Common Era, I don't think we have a lot of evidence that this was the pervasive belief of God back then. But let's be clear that, yes, this arguably 1,000-year-old idea that God is something like Santa Claus and picks favorite football teams and listens to prayers and does what we want and is always right and always good. Of course, I think it's jacked up. I don't think it's congruent with much. I don't think it's congruent with science. I don't think it's congruent with psychology. I don't think it's congruent with some of the universal trends and patterns we see even in the world of religious studies, spiritual development, and the mystical teachings and writings, which are remarkably uniform around the world. However, here's where my reaction came from, and this is an important next step in our understanding. So first, we have always considered the context. Second, we have remember that any story of God, any idea of God is always just a reference to something that defies containment, something that defies explanation, something that defies human control or understanding. Now, can some of those short-sighted or anthropomorphic or ethnocentric visions of God work? Yeah, they can work in a limited way for a confined group of people, but usually they'll wreak havoc in the world, and they have. So then we're moving on to this next point, and it has to do with the way this clip was positioned. And I wish you could see the clip right now. I have duetted it on my TikTok account so you can see what it is. But the way the clip was edited, it suggests or it implies that Neil deGrasse Tyson not only disagrees with this view of God, but it is presented as though this were the only view of God. And that by disagreeing with this view of God, he disagrees with all views of God. Now, I have since done a little research, and I have learned that's not exactly what he believes or has said, and he's actually very aware of many, many concepts of God. So let's leave him alone. However, the framing of his comments demonstrated by the editor and the people that responded a kind of ethnocentrism we have in the world of spirituality, science, and religion today that is dangerous, that is irresponsible, and I have called it racist. Now, the more accurate term for this is ethnocentric. Ethnocentric is when you assume that your worldview, right, your ethnology, your ethnicity, your ethnic position is the center of reality, the center of the universe, ethnocentric. And the reason why I call ethnocentric racist is twofold. The first is most people don't know the word ethnocentric, but they know the word racist, and that gets people's attention. But the second thing that is significant is that you must understand that the majority of our problems of disparity, division, imbalance in terms of economics, in terms of gender, in terms of race, are rooted in ethnocentrism. And yes, it's perpetuated by people of all genders and people of all skin colors because it is ultimately their absorption of a reality that says the white privilege-based colonial mindset and therefore the Christian tradition is the fundamental reality to respond to. So if a scientist or science disagrees with that reality, it disagrees with all religious and spiritual realities. That's dangerous because there are hundreds of important models of religion and spirituality in the world that could contribute to a better world and even scientific solutions.